Welcome to the Monday, or I suppose I should say, welcome to the Monday morning mixtape. On this week's special, we'll be talking about the legend of Pete Steele. Oh. Welcome to the show. That's Pete Steele's ghost. Jumped into me there.
It just sounded like you're talking through a mouthful of mashed potatoes.
Why mashed potatoes? Mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes.
Oh, no,
Is that a song?
I think it by a 1940s ad.
Yeah. Hey, we're in the good times. It's World War II. Oh,
remember to support the troops by buying Johnson & Johnson's mashed potatoes.
Yeah. And eat your spinach.
It made Popeye strong. It'll help us fight the Kaiser.
Yeah, indeed. Yes.
But speaking of Kaiser, this week's it's the legend of Pete Steele. For people who aren't familiar with Pete Steele, he was the front man of Typo Negative,
amongst other bands.
Yeah, well, just really Typo Negative. He was in two bands before Typo Negative. It wasn't like he went off doing solo projects or anything like that.
Or did he?
Maybe he did. You'll have to stay tuned to find out.
Yes.
But no, he didn't. It's. I suppose, where do you start with Pete?
Let's start at the beginning.
Yes, you would have been familiar with him, Mark, I suppose. Jen, I don't know if you'd be.
Not a clue. I didn't have a clue who it was. I was totally like, huh? And then I looked him up and I was like, I recognised his face. So
you did?
Yeah, I did. So obviously I've come across him in some capacity before. His music definitely had never heard before. So yeah.
What do you think?
How did you watch him on Jerry Springer or something? Was that where you managed to stumble across his face
maybe.
before?
The music,
Playgirl.
It was
yes,
alright, actually.
Pervert.
Playgirl.
I didn't hate it nearly as much as I thought I would.
Good.
Hey, that's high. That's a high accolade from me. Come on.
I didn't hate it nearly as much as I thought I would. Slap that on the back of an album.
It was actually alright.
That would have been a quote they'd easily put on one of their albums.
I was mildly impressed and only slightly disturbed by the music.
Only slightly disturbed. Again, another quote they would have slapped on the back of their albums.
I thought his everything kind of about him, the stuff I was reading was quite interesting, and his looks changed a lot through the years. Like, you go to one photo and he looks like a generally handsome enough looking dude, and then you go to another and he looks satanic and scary and like he wants to murder you in your sleep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my...
He's generally affable, though. I don't think he wanted to murder you in your sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what it kind of... That was my kind of first impression.
Impressions.
Anyway.
Yes. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well-mannered.
I think he is kind of like, when you use a legend for like title for Pete Steele, I think it's well earned.
Yeah.
Like, people even to this day still, like, every year when like the anniversary of his death comes up, there's still like stuff about him, people talking about him, and he was just so well liked in the metal world. He was like a funny guy, and everyone just says he was the nicest person that you'd ever meet. That people always say that him and Dimebag Darrell were like up there as the two sweetest people, you know, that looked after people, incredibly generous towards things. And if you look at any of the live footage of him or any of the
backstage
DVDs or interviews and stuff like
that.
that, he's just an incredibly warm, or was an incredibly warm and
funny kind of
good soul there.
Good natured.
And the thing that was great about Typo Negative was they were so self-deprecating as well. It was part of the thing, which we'll kind of get into, I suppose, when we're talking about it. But Mark, you would have been more familiar with him, I suppose.
I would have, yeah. Like, I think I said it before on a previous episode, but it was yourself who got me into him previously by when I had my first MP3 player. You loaded on kind of every song I asked for, and then you were like, you might also like these other songs, and loaded on a bunch of other songs, including a bunch of Typo Negative. You're just like, you'll like it, trust me.
Yes, I'll force this upon you.
Did you like it, or did you feel like you had to like it?
No, I actually did like it. Like, especially the one that kind of really kind of was like, kind of made me pause at first was My Girlfriend's Girlfriend.
My girlfriend's girlfriend.
It was just like so odd and weird. It was just like, it kind of make you pause and go, what the fuck am I listening to? But I actually ended up really enjoying it and still do to this day. And then kind of from there, I listened to any of the other songs on that MP3 player, but at the time I didn't go off and kind of really dig into them. It was only kind of years later I kind of remembered it, started listening to that, and then I kind of was like, what album was that even on? And then I kind of started listening to October Rust, and I really enjoyed that album. Now I think that's still a good album. Kind of listened to a few others, but it's still kind of, that was the first album, and I think you always have a special place for the first album of any band that you dig into as well.
Yeah, I think when you get kind of that kind of effect from the first album where it's like they have that warmth.
Yeah, where the first discovery, you kind of go, oh my god, I read that song is brilliant. I need to discover more, and it's like that first sort of like first sight of land or something. You're just like, oh my god, I've discovered it. I need to, exactly. I need to know. I need to know more. Tell me more.
But it is just a thing. I suppose getting into it, kind of like with Pete Steele, Brooklyn native, Russian Polish descent. He was like, for people that don't know, he was like 6'8".
Yeah,
he
huge,
was like
big, imposing
giant
slab of a man.
He loved the colour green, was the whole thing, which permeates throughout Typo Negative's whole career. He was the youngest child, which I can identify with. But the whole thing, if you look at, there was one interview we were looking at where he was talking about his family, and apparently he was like incredibly close to his family the whole way through his life until near the end of his life, when he got basically committed in a psychiatric hospital and in rehab, through his family. And he was like, he disowned certain, and he was like, fuck them, some of them were junkies as well. I didn't fucking get involved with their lives and put them in these places and all that. But I'll get to that near the end. But he was like, nice family, incredibly hard working family as well, and I think that all kind of like passed on to him as well. And he was just like a blue collar guy, which most of the guys in Typo Negative are, which is I think part of their charm as well. Where they're very much like, hey, we're from Brooklyn, New York. Yeah,
very down to earth. Hey,
kind
what
of a thing, with it. And it's I don't know if that was the down to earthness of him as well that kind of like endeared him to so many people. So I think it kind of was, because like when you look back at a lot of the goth kind of stuff that they were doing, it kind of mixed weirdly with the way that they sounded and they acted, and you know, there's just, I don't know, there's that
weird dichotomy, I suppose. And
it's one of the things I suppose about, there's not much about his early life around it. I'm sure if you go digging you'll find fucking tons of it, but it doesn't seem to be as important with him as it does with some other people. Like, you know, if you're talking about Kurt Cobain or Ozzy Osbourne, like with Ozzy Osbourne with his criminal past, and with Birmingham. Well, like, I think being from Brooklyn and the Catholic definitely kind of like shaped large part of the music and the influence that kind of went into it, the Gothic style and so on. But as well, I suppose the whole thing when the band started, they formed with like, they were all friends as well. With it, but I'm forgetting. There's people will look back that Carnivore was the first band. Well, it wasn't the first band that he was in.
That those friends formed before Typo Negative, or that Pete Steele was in?
That Pete Steele was in. And it was, like, the albums are still out there. They're very well respected. They're kind of more punky than Typo Negative and a little bit more extreme, but they kind of still had some of the humour, which I suppose people looking back on it now, they kind of go, oh, they're really, really offensive. And it was like, that was kind of part of the humour at the time, because it was like overly offensive to the point where it was like, I mean,
absurdly offensive.
Yeah, that they were like, people were like calling them racists and homophobes and things like that, to the point that, then on later album with Typo Negative, that they did a song called "Kill All the White People" to try and say kind of like, you know, we're not racist. It's kind of it's just ridiculous. Kind of like, you know, it's kind of with it.
It's okay to kill all the white people, though.
So we're not being racist towards any one person in particular. It's just like everybody. We hate everybody.
Nice.
But when you're Carnivore,
oh, you think this? I'm going to take a sharp left and just mow everyone down.
Yes, exactly.
But the Carnivore broke up near the end of the 80s, despite being, and then kind of like they formed This is where Typo Negative came from, with Josh Silver, Kenny Hickey, and Sal Abrascato. Yeah. At the start of it, I think they were going with the name Repulsion, and then they changed it to Sub-Zero, and that's where they got their symbol, the Typo Negative, where it's like the circle with the minus in the middle of it. But like with Repulsion, they found out, I think it was an English band were already called Repulsion, and they were like, you have to stop calling yourselves Repulsion. They were like, alright. And then they found out Sub-Zero was like another New York band, I think, maybe, or something like that, and they were like,
and of course,
shit.
Like, isn't that a character as well in
Oh, that would have been long before. Yeah. But it was, then he was like, because it was all around, he really liked the symbol.
Yeah.
So then he was like, fucking, and I think he was saying that he heard, it was like, some kind of like ad campaign where they're looking for people to donate blood. And he was like, Typo Negative, that kind of fits.
Yeah.
And that was, the birth of a Typo Negative. But I suppose when they started off as well, like their first, I suppose going through album by album is probably a good way of talking.
Yeah, why not?
Let's do it
about him, because
so first up, the second last album.
Yeah, why not?
Well, so did you listen to the first of Slow, Deep and Hard?
No, I didn't anyway. As I said, I went back and listened to October Rust, and then I listened to some of Bloody Kisses.
Yeah, I did say.
Those two albums, I think, are probably
the highlights.
The highlights, yeah. Slow, Deep and Hard, very, very different from it. Like, they have that Typo Negative sound in it, but it's more kind of punky. It's a little bit more disjointed as well.
Trying to find their own voice at that time, are they? Or they haven't really settled on their sound, is it?
They sound like Typo Negative. They had that kind of thing, because like one of the things with Pete Steele as well, they were all very much like, they're fantastic musicians, and I think whatever way they came together, they kind of had their sound nearly from the start. It changed a little bit over the years, but it was only like fine tuned, I think, more so. Or as when they talk about it, they were saying that they kind of started realizing that, I think after Kisses, or that they could get goth chicks from doing certain types of music, so then they started veering the music in a certain direction.
Of course they did.
So it was like about getting women. Because like that was the whole thing with Pete. I think he was like very shy when he was younger. He wasn't like a ladies' man. He wasn't really getting, and then this was all new with the band. And as well, when they started off, he was working in parks and recreation.
Yeah, essentially.
And he loved it.
Yeah,
but he was like such a character in, like, the parks in New York that he was known as the Green Man, and apparently he was really nice, like the homeless people, but people loved him, and he apparently loved the job. Like, he was like
a team up with Spider-Man.
Fighting against the Green Goblin. But
Spider-Man comes on, I'm going to fight you, the Green Goblin. No, I'm actually the Green Man. Jane Jones Jameson gets a field day. This just in. Spider-Man beats up a random like civil servant.
Like, what are you doing? But
I swear it was Mysterio. He made me do it.
Music here, music there, music everywhere. But with Slow, Deep and Hard, their first album, it was I think it was a little bit dark. Well, it's hard to say it's darker than some of the other, but it's more about kind of like him dealing with kind of like someone being cheating on him and killing a person and all that, and which is really because it kind of played out in real life later on, to a certain degree.
So what, this kind of time, they'd be more kind of aimed at kind of the more doom metal side of it, is it?
No, there was more punk.
Actually,
it was
a bit thrashier, a bit punkier. Yeah.
It was probably like a different version of Carnivore, really. With it. And like the thing with it, like with sound wise, say if you look at Pete Steele's bass rig, he talks about he's left-handed. And he went into, I think that was when they started the band. They were, I think it was with Carnivore, maybe it was with Fallout, the first band that he was in. It was this whole thing where he was only a temporary guitar player in it, and there was a guitar player coming in, and he knew as soon as the guitar player came in, he'd be out of the band, and he just really wanted to stay in the band, so he went off and traded in his guitar for a bass. So when he was trading it in, the left-handed bass was more expensive than the right-handed bass, and the guy in the shop was like, you learn how to play, figure out, you'll be okay. And he wouldn't like it, so he was like, so he had to learn
right-handed bass, which I relate to quite a lot. I'm left-handed, and when I started learning how to play, my guitar teacher went, "Is there anybody left-handed in the class?" And I put my hand up, and he just went, Anyway, here's the chord of G.
Wow.
And I was just like, brilliant, lovely. So I didn't realise there was actually left-handed instruments until some years later, at which time it was too late to unlearn. And anyway, I'm as Pete Steele had found out, it is cheaper to buy right-handed instruments than it is specialised left-handed ones.